So I'm really thrilled to be speaking today with Georg Kell, the chairman of Arabesque, longtime friend and also a member of the World Environment Center. And Georg has a new book that he has co-edited with others on the topic of sustainable investing. And we're using this occasion to talk to Georg about the book and about some of the ideas underlying it. So Georg, welcome and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your making some time today.
Thank you, Clint.
Yeah, if I could ask you to start, just tell us about the book. What is it about? Who are you aiming it for, and why should we read it?
Yeah, well, the book tries to take stock of where ESG investing is today and what the prospects for the future are. We discovered 2-3 years ago that existing textbooks on finance are kind of outdated, not taking into consideration the changes that have actually happened already in the corporate world in regards to sustainability and the many changes, incremental changes that corporations have introduced over the past 2 decades or more. And at the same time, taking stock of the rapidly changing landscape in the world of finance, which has now started probably in the 2014, 2015 to take ESG investing seriously. So the book really tells the story of a convergence between corporate responsibility and its drivers and sustainable investing and how the two are converging now. We are convinced that this will open up new opportunities for market-led changes, for change from within, largely enabled by technology, but it's a big evolutionary step, so to speak, because in the past we looked at corporate sustainability in isolation, we looked at impact investing, sustainable investing in isolation. We are bringing this together. So we brought together leading voices, practitioners, executives from the corporate world and from the world of finance and a few thought leaders to tell that story with the attempt to also look a little bit ahead of where does this lead us to. I think we have 3 big insights that ring through most of the chapters. One is the recognition that the pace of change in the framework conditions itself within which markets operate is changing more rapidly. So the framework conditions themselves are changing, largely because of technology, but also because of planetary boundaries and the feedback loops we increasingly have to deal with. And thirdly, of social changes, social movements, and governance changes. So that is one cluster of clear insights that comes out. Understand the forces behind the changing conditions within which markets operate. And that, I think, has come out very clear, and that should be helpful for anybody, for analysts, for executives, for students of finance. We no longer can just look at finance as a black box exercise bounded by a few macro figures rested exclusively upon the hypothesis of efficient market hypothesis. No, we have to look at it in a systemic way now. And that's the second big contribution the book will hopefully make. It presents different 360-degree perspectives on this change agenda, from the technology angle, from the social angle, from the environmental angle, and even from the political angle a little bit. Basically driving home the message that in today's world, we need a horizontal, systemic understanding of the change in order to make sense out of it and to position strategies and operations for a future fit model. And that comes out, I think, also very clearly. And the third deep conclusion of the book that is probably a bit more daring is that much more work needs to be done, including on the theoretical foundations of finance, because some of the old assumptions just no longer hold. We are not in an equilibrium state of well-being. We are in a state of constant disruption. We are moving into uncharted waters. So we need a new evolutionary thinking forward, understanding the forces, understanding the choices and options. So the book makes a stronger case for even on the theoretical side. Also, we are a bit cautious on that front. Our good friend, Professor Lowe from the MIT, who wrote an endorsement, I think is thinking along the same lines. His last book, Adaptive Financial Markets, has greatly inspired us, I must say. And I understand that he's working on the next round now. So we also hope on the theoretical side. On the practical side, very concrete implications for executives of companies. Above all, this holistic understanding at the leadership level. It means sustainability really has to become part of leadership, no longer relegated to some communications department or reporting department. It's about strategy, it's about the future, and that message is very clear. For finance, we also have very concrete contributions, how to bring this change about. Many financial organizations, institutions have started the journey, but they haven't really embraced the sustainability agenda yet. They ask the question of how do I do it within? How do I change my institution to become future fit? The book gives some answers.
Great, thank you. Your point about the sort of the theoretical basis of markets and investing needing to be updated, that I think 2020 shows how true that is. This is such a disruptive year in every way that to look at markets the way we have in the past is out of date. What, it's early days, I know your book has just come out, but what kind of reaction do you get to that message? Do you get agreement? Do you get disagreement? Blank stares? How are people reacting to that more fundamental message in the book?
No, I'm just back from a trip, and I met a couple of top executives, and I'm actually quite confident that this message resonates very well. All executives now face the challenge of reinventing themselves. Many are discovering only now that these slow-moving changes add up to a huge momentum, and you better be prepared. COVID-19, as you hinted at, has clearly brought home the message that being prepared is essential for survival, and these slow-moving risks and opportunities add up to enormous new landscapes. Our subtitle of the book is a new path to a new horizon, and we are playing on Mark Carney's famous quote, the tragedy of the horizon, which speaks to the dilemma of the short term versus the long term. And basically what it also means, as executive, you have to survive in the day-to-day battle, yes, but you no longer can afford ignoring the long-term trends. So one has to basically build up the ability to think in multi-timescales simultaneously and prepare the ground for the future today already.
Great, thanks. Let's talk a little bit about the underlying phenomenon, sustainable investing, or ESG investing as it's come to be known. You've been in this field of sustainability for a long time, and my dog is in the background. We're all adapting to new circumstances. He's excited about your book too. But give us your perspective. How did this phenomenon arise so fast, ESG investing? And for the cynics out there, is it real or is it just window dressing? You know, does this mark a real change in investor attitudes, or is it just greenwashing?
Yeah, let me give a brief historical review of this issue. In 2005, I had the privilege convincing Kofi Annan convening a working group with asset owners called Who Cares Wins, and they coined the term ESG. We then launched PRI the next year at the New York Stock Exchange. And the issue didn't really take off, frankly. Yes, some big asset owners, pension funds, conscious of their universal ownership notion, understood intuitively that negative externalities anywhere affect their portfolios, but it wasn't really translated into strategies for new investments. It was not. Then came the financial crisis. The big story was overregulation, survival, easy money. Not much happened either. It wasn't until 2014 that the issue really started to take off, with the first meta studies confirming there is a correlation between good ESG integration at the corporate level and long-term valuation. Arabesque, together with Oxford University, was one of the first meta studies. It was called From the Stockholder to the Stakeholder. Now, many more studies have come out now from Harvard, Singapore, and all over the world, hinting at a relationship. And the debate is still ongoing. Is ESG investing just a fig leaf or not? I'm convinced now, with 1/3 of global available investment, over $30 trillion, using some kind of ESG filter or selection criteria already, it's unstoppable. And what's behind it is something very trivial. It's basically the recognition that our current price signals do not reflect the full extent of both risks and opportunities, because they're short-term in design and they behave in a herd movement. ESG basically is looking a little bit around the corner, what is likely to come, trying to put valuation on non-traditional financial issues, which we know have relevance financially over time, but are not yet fully reflected in the price signal. So it's like a bridge into the future, not a guarantee, but a bridge, a soft bridge. I'm jokingly always saying it allows you to look a little bit around the corner of the future. So it's basically an adjustment without challenging the existing system. Also in our book, we do not argue you should do away with efficient market hypothesis. No, the price signal system is the most effective resource allocator ever invented by humanity. What's needed is that the price signals more fully reflect the real threats and opportunities around the corner. And that's what ESG delivers, and that's what financial institutions increasingly understand. And all over the world now, from Asia to the US, from Finland to South Africa, financial institutions are currently developing capabilities to better integrate ESG into decision-making and allocations. Yes, the landscape is still very fuzzy out there. There's a data jungle, there's an alphabet soup out there, but there are important building blocks, the materiality notion, the SASB definitions in the US, integrated reporting in Europe, as it's called, the TCFD framework for financial institutions, the science-based target initiative for the corporate world with almost 1,000 companies already in it. So we're talking here really of big systemic movements, both in the world of finance and in the world of business, which are now taking shape. We also expect that the European taxonomy will be a major boost for this movement, because it will probably bring about a bit more coherence in that field. And yes, there's still a lot of inconsistency, incoherence, benchmarks can't be really compared. MIT talks about the aggregate confusion in one of their beautiful review articles, but the whole field is moving in the same direction. And with big data analytics and smart analytics, and in particular AI, increasingly it is possible to identify materially relevant information, both from what companies themselves disclose, but also from unstructured data available elsewhere. And that's clearly here to stay, because the world will increasingly be dependent on the natural environment, on social changes. The pace of change is not slowing down. Technological change is irreversible. The planetary boundary feedback loops will increasingly manifest themselves and force a reaction, ready or not. And also the big social changes that are happening, social movements will not stop. If anything, they will accelerate. So the drivers behind this agenda are not standing still. Therefore, ESG investing will become the new normal until price signals better or more fully reflect externalities, opportunities, and costs. And then at some point, you can argue it is just part of the pricing system. But in this transition period, where we are moving towards a more sustainable, decarbonized, cleaner environment, ESG plays an important role.
So I think a lot of us are believers in the underlying theory. One of the challenges is that, as you say, if you're looking around the corner, you're looking ahead of where traditional financial accounting allows us to make objective decisions. And you touched in your previous answer on the sort of the thicket of different standards and the fuzziness that's out there now in terms of analytics. How should we be thinking about that? How long will it take roughly for there to be a generally accepted accounting metric for this? How will that shake out? If I'm an executive in a public company, how should I be surfing this wave, given we don't know exactly where it's going to break?
Yeah, it's very hard to predict. I mean, it took financial accounting 100 years to get established, right? A friend of mine always says ESG measurement is currently where financial accounting was in 1925, a few years before the big crash. So, but maybe the world is turning faster, so the evolution will most likely be faster. A lot depends obviously on the regulatory context, and currently we are on a pathway of fragmentation, but that may change. So once politics aims at more coherence again and comparability, it may fast track almost overnight. It's very hard to predict now. We are in a very unique space in human history now, where Europe seems to go its own way, the US seems to go its own way, China goes its own way, and many other countries are forced to align themselves somewhere in between. We are no longer in this multilateral world where a global standard, by definition, is the desired outcome politically. On the contrary, political power now is actually driving a fragmentation rather than a harmonization. So that seems to be blow against, but the market forces they are political. So I'm quite optimistic that they will continue to make the case for the materiality relevant issues and to better get a handle on them. So there's a mechanism built into the market logic itself, which will drive the issue forward. If regulators then come together and give it a boost, it will happen obviously much faster. But even in the absence of regulatory pushes, I'm quite optimistic that market forces themselves will bring about greater coherence pretty soon.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Let's shift gears to your journey. Let's talk about Georg Kell, and you know, you're sort of voting with your feet on that theory that if governments can't come together and plot the course, then markets may. So you've moved from a role at the UN, a very important role, founding and leading the Global Compact, and now you're the chairman of a very interesting company called Arabesque. Tell us about Arabesque, what's it trying to do, and how did Georg Kell end up chairing this really innovative company?
Well, I used to be very skeptical about finance as an engineer, I must confess. For me, finance was always the necessary evil, as Keynes put it. But when I retired from the UN, I came across Arabesque, and I was totally impressed. First, I didn't believe that they're really only about sustainability and technology and nothing else. So no legacy of old structures of a bank, or and it's run by investment bankers, former senior bankers from Barclays who bought it out from there. So the idea of jumpstarting finance as a catalyst to me was very attractive. And I always had a weak spot for technology itself as the fundamental driver of human progress. So it wasn't a difficult choice for me. And I like the startup business too, you know, building something is fun. And that's how I ended up with Arabesque, and I have no regrets whatsoever, because Arabesque has 3 complementary business models, all of them related to each other. One is classic ESG investing, deep integration of ESG data into investment strategies. The second one is big data. We call it S-ray, the equivalent to the X-ray on the human S-ray for the corporate. Big data for sustainability assessment of publicly listed companies. Huge progress there, including special tools such as the temperature score, which measures the footprint on climate and so forth, human rights and so forth. So the data approach. And the third one, which until recently I didn't really believe so much into, but now I'm totally convinced of, is AI. We have one of Europe's leading AI teams for years already, and the machine they have been building is just blows off your mind. Also, with my engineering background, I couldn't quite wrap my mind around it anymore, quite frankly, but I understand the power of the signals that it can produce and the enormous capacities for signal strengths. And it's foreseeable that AI will disrupt finance very quickly in the area of portfolio construction and management, for example. It will happen very soon, major disruption. To me, it's a proof point that progress based on technology together with the new valuation ESG together is extremely powerful. And that's what I like about Arabesque. This is the exclusive focus, technology and ESG data. And so it's a wonderful playground, very exciting, very demanding. We just concluded an A round, so we feel confident for the next future. But the race is on. It's a good race.
Yeah. So like you, as in my case, an aging Gen Xer, I think we both may be in that demographic. I'm a little bit skeptical about all of these claims of AI and how it's going to change the world. But you've become convinced in your field.
Well, I give you one example. Yeah, Glenn.
Investing.
Yeah. I actually studied at the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, and in those days already, I actually worked on AI in 1980 to 83. And in those days, we had the old WEC systems. The best it could produce was expert systems, diagnostic systems with very long and complicated algorithms. Today, I just spent 2 days not so long ago with Google over there and their cloud computing in our team. And I understood for the first time in my life the power of big data and what it brings in additional insights and the ease with which these insights can be generated. It blew me off. And I also realized that the cloud business, for example, is revolutionizing so many classic business service functions besides that. And it's a product of the ability to deal with data. So we are already in a new world. We just haven't realized it yet. That's kind of my interpretation. A lot of companies are already plowing ahead full force. They're doing it quietly. They don't want to be too loud about it because it could create regulatory reactions and all sorts of political, social debates. But it's unstoppable. The challenge now is to ensure that technological progress is used for good purpose. Like any new invention we always have the choice how we apply it. We can use a hammer to build a house. We can use a hammer to kill somebody. The more powerful the technology, the greater the potential on both sides. So I think AI for good, for ESG investing is a wonderful purpose. So I feel very good about that. But that battle is still ahead. The purpose of technology and the various debates that are playing out already are just a precursor of that.
Yeah. So here we are in 2020. I like your image of we're in the future. We're just realizing it now. The tremendous shocks we're feeling this year, a global pandemic and its associated recession, the almost spontaneous global movement for racial and social justice and the frustration at how long that's been denied. And of course, the climate crisis that's upon us. You could say all three of these things, well, you have to say all three of these things have been predicted for a long time. We've known these are here for a long time. Now the world is waking up to them. But we are just waking up. How does this affect your thesis about where sustainable investing is headed? What do the shocks of 2020 mean for the ESG investing movement?
Well, as many others have argued, and so did I mean, obviously a crisis always brings out both the good and the bad sides of human beings, of organizations, of collective responses. So we have seen the best and the worst at the same time. And the challenge now is to learn out of this and to translate it into the good lessons learned. I'm a strong believer in human abilities to reinvent themselves under crisis and stress. I've seen it many times at the corporate level when they hit the wall, when a corporate crisis sets in and the wake-up call is understood, then renewal, innovation from the inside is fairly easy to make. In crisis situations, the barriers of resistance are much lower. So that's why so many more companies, since COVID broke out, now have embraced climate roadmaps, for example, and are much more serious. It's really impressive how the Science Based Target Initiative has welcomed record numbers of new companies, for example. To me, that is a signal that during crisis situations, you can implement changes much easier and you can prepare for the future. Now, will the world learn the right lessons. The debate is ongoing, how the recovery funds are used. Will they be invested for future fit infrastructure, or will they just be burned in the moment to continue with business as usual? That's one of the big open question marks. And will the world come together again, recognize that there are global threats which only can be tackled through cooperation? No country will be safe so long as the virus is hiding out somewhere. So we all should have, in our national interest, the willingness to collaborate. Climate change, I don't need to tell you, Glenn, you know, it doesn't respect national boundaries. So even if we do our share, if the neighbors don't, it doesn't necessarily assure survival. So we have every reason to rediscover collaboration. That's the big bottom line. And I hope the world will ultimately arrive at the same conclusion.
Great. Well, collaboration is the MO of the World Environment Center, which I have the privilege to lead, and you're one of our valued members. So, you know, as a final set of thoughts, what can the World Environment Center do to advance that cause of collaboration for sustainability, and particularly in this arena of ESG investing? How can we be most helpful to Arabesque and others in your field who are trying to advance this mission?
Your great work is very important because sharing the best practices and stimulating learnings across sectors and industries is the key now. I'm also convinced that our new world, old lines of divisions are breaking down. Industry coupling, innovation increasingly creates new business model across and between established industries. That's exactly where you are active. So you play a critical role as a catalyst for best practices to spread wide and fast. And the more you can involve, the better, because the faster the learning, the faster the acceleration of change, the better our chance for having a soft landing in the future.
Great. And for the WEC members out there, they'll be glad to know that Georg and his colleagues at Arabesque are working with us on a 2-day roundtable on this topic of ESG investing. So we'll dig deeper into all of these questions in a roundtable we're planning virtually for December this year. So stay tuned for more on that. Georg, what else have we not talked about? Anything else you'd like to share with our members and other viewers?
Well, the notion of leadership is always important. You know, it never goes away at the corporate level, everywhere. The question also, I think, how can you make a momentum of change going in the absence of a crisis? These are important issues. Nobody has a golden answer to that. A lot of executives now recognize that they have to move faster on these issues, but they have internal resistance. So how can we support them in creating the momentum? That's one area I suggest for your consideration, because you're basically helping executives to be successful, and they want to create an internal momentum to advance the change faster. That's not always easy, but how to do, very important. That's one. I could now go at length on macro issues, but it's very tempting. I'm concerned that you know, geostrategically, we are falling into a trap that we abandon collaboration. So anything we can do to demonstrate that through working together, we can accomplish more is extremely precious and valuable. I also believe that the transatlantic relation will become stronger again. I think what we have seen in the last 2-3 years will not reflect the future. So investing in that, I think, is also a good thing to do, building a transatlantic understanding and making sure the good historical lessons we all have learned won't get lost, but carry us into a safe future together. So these are kind of the bigger points, just as an appetizer on the margins.
Well, let's close on those points, and particularly the one about individual leadership and what we all can do. You know, my family and I come from the Midwest of the United States, and we're big believers in the public good and the role of government. And I'm sad that right now many of our elected officials aren't leading us the way we would like. However, it's really about turning to ourselves. What can we do as citizens? What can we do as leaders? And hopefully at the World Environment Center, we can empower executives and partners to carry these ideas forward. And you've done your share now with this new book. So the book is Sustainable Investing, A Path to a New Horizon. Georg Kell edited together with Herman Brill and Andreas Rush. So I commend it to everyone as important reading, and hopefully it'll encourage us all to push harder for more momentum on sustainability and collaboration. So Georg, with that, we'll draw this interview to a close. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Glenn. All the best.